Boker Tov, good morning.
Andrew?
Okay, Boker Tov. So today's daf is 62. Hi. 62, I think. Boker Tov. I'm not sure, where did we get to yesterday?
To like one line before the Mishnah.
Okay, Shkoyach. One line before the Mishnah, so it's Velo b'shiryon, velo b'kasda, velo b'magafayim. Right, so these are three things that the Mishnah says a man should not go out to the public domain with. Shiryon, kasda, magafayim. So the Gemara just explains now what are these things. Shiryon, zrada. It's like an armor, that's how they translate it. The kasda, amar Rav sanvarta, like a helmet, but Rashi says it's like a leather hat under the metal helmet. The magafayim, amar Rav kuzmeke, like boots, metal boots. Okay, so anyway, there's a prohibition to go out with that to the public domain. The person might remove it, and maybe because it's too heavy. Okay, until now we spoke in this chapter about things that are rabbinically forbidden to go to the public domain with, and now comes a Mishnah that speaks about some things that are biblically forbidden. Lo tetzeh isha b'machat hanekuva. A woman should not go out to the public domain with with such a needle. It's not considered a jewelry. It's not a garment. It's a burden. Velo betaba'at sheyesh alea chotam. Also not with a signet ring. A signet ring is not considered a woman's jewel. Men used to go with a signet ring, but not women. Velo bekulyar. Kulyar, the Gemara will explain what that is. Velo bechovelet. So this too the Gemara will explain. Velo betzlochit shel palayton. It's like a necklace with something with the balsam, some perfume. According to Rabbi Meir, for all these things, one is liable to chatat. It's a biblical burden, unnecessary. The Chachamim potrin b'chovelet v'tzlochit shel palayton. Two things the sages exempt. Chovelet, the Gemara will explain what that is, and tzlochit shel palayton. So all this will be explained in the Gemara. But the first thing the Gemara explains is the case of the signet ring. So basically we said in this chapter that a signet ring, for a woman, it's not a jewel. She's liable to chatat for going out with that. But a ring without a signet is a woman's jewel, and there's no chatat liability for that. It's only rabbinically forbidden. About this, Amar Ula, v'chilufeihen be'ish. The opposite is in case of a man. If a man goes out to the public domain with a ring without a signet, the man is liable to chatat. Because a ring without a signet is only a woman's jewel and not a man's jewel. And only a signet ring is for men, and rings without signet are for women. Okay, so evidently, Alma, Kasavar Ula, Kol midei dechazi leish, lo chazi leisha, umidei dechazi leisha, lo chazi leisha. Ula holds that if something fits for men, it's considered unfit for women, and vice versa. And if it's fit for women, it's unfit for men. Each gender have their own jewelry, their own adornments, and what is fit for this one is not fit for that one. But now comes a challenge to that. Let's say typically only women go with the rings without a signet, and men only go with the signet rings. But why can we not say that since it's considered an adornment for him, it could also be considered an adornment for her? Mativ Rav Yosef, just like we found in this following Braita, that says, Haroim yotzim besakin, shepherds may go out to the public domain with sackcloth. That's what they used to wear. And even though typically only shepherds used to wear that, the Braita says, "Velo haroim bilvad," not only shepherds, ela kol adam, anyone may go out with that to the public domain. Ela shedarkan shel haroim latzet besakin. It's just customary for shepherds to go out with such sackcloth. But since for them it's typically a garment, so it's considered a garment for anyone. So if we say this, that it's the same between shepherds and other people, why don't we say it between men and women? If something is good for women, so why can't men also wear that? Or at least there should not be biblical liability for a man who wears a ring without a signet, or a woman for a signet ring. Well, that's a good question, but the answer might even be better. The answer says, Ela Amar Yosef, Kasavar Ula holds that Nashim am bifnei atzmanen. Yeah, nowadays this is the case, right? Nowadays men also wears rings without a signet. I'm not sure if anybody wears still signet rings, but right. So today a ring is considered unisex. There's no but it's because today many men go with a ring. But in those times, a ring without a signet was only for women, and signet rings were only for men. It was considered a man's jewel, and that's a women's jewel. But Ula holds that we cannot compare the thing that just like we learn from a shepherd to other people, so too we should learn from women to men or from men to women, because Nashim am bifnei atzman, and women are like a unique. I don't know how to translate it. Am bifnei atzman. It's like a separate nation. It's not a separate nation. It's like in separate people. They're different people. Men. How do they say? Men come from Venus, Mars, something. One comes from this star, one from that star. So each one is a different species, right? Different species. Unique species. Separate entity, okay. So shepherds and other people are not separate entities. Shepherds are human beings like other people. So if something is good for shepherds, it's good for other people. But men and women are like two different entities. And what is fit for women is not fit for men, and vice versa. Okay.
Rav Yosef doesn't hold that, right?
Rav Yosef, of course, Rav Yosef, who challenged it, does not hold that. Yeah. But halacha follows Ula, that it's like two different entities. Maybe that's what that book is based on. Women from Venus, Mars. These things put up women's backs. It's problematic. These things put up women's backs. I'm not sure I understand what you mean. It's just to say that women and men are like two different entities, and what is considered a jewel for one is not a jewel for the other. That's how it was in those times, that certain jewelries were designated for women only or for men only. Women are from Venus, men are from Mars. Okay. But why does it make people angry if women are different from men? So they also might have different types of jewelries for each one. Okay, and now comes a challenge to this. Eitev Abaye from a Mishnah in Masechet Eruvin had negative impact historically. I'm not sure I understand this. Okay, Abaye challenges from a Mishnah in Masechet Eruvin that says Hamotze tefillin machnisan zug. If one finds tefillin on Shabbat in the street, and that's of course a disgrace that tefillin will be on the floor, on the ground. So we should bring them into town pair by pair, put on the pair of tefillin, and that way it's okay to go with it in the public domain. And the Mishnah says, Echad ha'ish ve'echad ha'isha. Even if a woman found tefillin in the street, she should put it on, the hand tefillin, the head tefillin, and go with it and to put the tefillin in a safer place. Now, ve'i amarta nashim am bifnei atzman, and if indeed women are considered like a separate entity, and men's adornments are not fit for women, or men's jewelries are unfit for women, so obviously tefillin, which is a mitzvah of men, for a woman would be considered an unnecessary burden. So even if she wears it, she would be biblically liable for carrying it in the public domain because it's not a woman's jewel. So, והמצוות עשה שהזמן גרמה, תפילין is a positive time-dependent mitzvah. וכל מצוות עשה שהזמן גרמה, נשים פטורות. Women are exempt from any positive commandment which is dependent on time. And if tefillin are considered the men's garment or men's adornment, so then for a woman, if women are considered like a separate entity as Ula holds, so then for a woman there should be no permission to carry it on Shabbat. Even if she wears it, if she puts it on, it should be considered a burden, just like a signet ring for a woman. Even if she puts it on her finger, it's there's a legend that Rashi's daughters put on tefillin, but according to this opinion, she should be forbidden to put it on because it's only for men. The answer is that Mishnah in Eruvin holds that women are obligated to put on tefillin. Hatam kasava Rabbi Meir, Laila zman tefillinu v'Shabbat zman tefillinu. There are two disputes about two different times if it's time for the mitzvah of tefillin, night and Shabbat. Rabbi Meir holds that the mitzvah of tefillin applies 24/7 at night time, Shabbat, and therefore women are obligated to put on tefillin. Havali mitzvat aseh shelo azman grama. It's a positive commandment, not dependent on time. V'chol mitzvat aseh shelo azman grama nashim chayavot. And women are obligated in such a mitzvah. Hence, it's a woman's garment, a woman's jewel also. Okay, so that explains the thing about a signet ring, which is a man's jewel, and a ring without a signet, which is a woman's jewel. But now comes a question. We said that if a woman takes out to the public domain a signet ring on her finger, she is liable to chatat, because a signet ring is not considered a woman's jewel. The question is, but if she puts it on her finger, it's not the normal way of carrying things. The normal way of carrying things is carrying it in your hand, in your palm. If you put it on your finger, it's like a shinui, it's a deviation from the normal way of carrying it. And as such, there should not be a biblical liability for that, because the biblical liability for labor on Shabbat is only if it's done in a normal way. Melechet machshevet. Any change you make, any shinui, lowers it from a biblical liability to rabbinic liability. So if she carries this ring, if she would have carried it in her palm, holding it in her hand, that would be carrying a burden, carrying something in the public domain, which is biblically forbidden. But if she puts it on her finger, which apparently is an abnormal way of carrying things, how could the Mishnah say she's liable to chatat? It's supposed to be maybe only forbidden rabbinically, but not chatat, which is a biblical liability. So the answer is, Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, the Mishnah is dealing with a woman whose way is to carry it on her finger. And some women sometimes carry a signet ring on their finger. Who are those women? Amar Rabbi Yirmiyah, gizbarit askinan. It's a woman whose job is gizbarit. What's gizbarit? Like a secretary or something like that. That she always, during the week also, she's accustomed to put the ring on her finger. For her, it's a normal way of carrying it. It does not render it her jewel. The fact that she goes with that during the week on her finger does not make it a woman's jewel, but it does consider it for her to be a normal way of carrying it. That's why she's biblically liable for carrying it on Shabbat. Okay, but that explains the case of the woman. But Ula says, in the opposite case, men are also liable for putting on their finger a ring without a signet on Shabbat. So Amar Rava, teratzta isha, ish ma'ikal meimar. There's still a question on the man. Why is the man liable for putting on his finger a ring without a signet on Shabbat if it's apparently an abnormal way of carrying it? Answer is that since women and also men sometimes carry such rings on their finger for different needs, it's considered a normal way of carrying a ring. אלא אמר רב, הפעמים שאדם נותן לאשתו, sometimes the man gives his wife, טבעת שיש עליה חותם, a signet ring, להוליכה לקופסה, to put it in the box, ומניחתה באצבעה, בידה, עד שמגעת לקופסה, and she puts it under her finger until she comes to the box. So it's considered a normal way of carrying such a ring for women. And also, בפעמים שהאישה נותנת לבעלה, sometimes the woman gives to her husband, טבעת שאין עליה חותם, her ring, without a signet, להוליכה אצל אומן, לתקן, to bring it to the craftsman, to repair it, ומניחה באצבעו עד שמגיע אצל אומן, and he puts it on his finger until he comes to the craftsman. So it's a normal way of carrying a ring for, even though it's not your jewel, it's normal for you to carry it on your finger, and that's why there's biblical liability for carrying it that way. Okay, so the Mishnah also says, "Velo b'chulyar, kulyar, velo b'chovelet," and what are these things? My kulyar, amar Rav, machbanta. Machbanta, it's I'm not sure in English. It's like a sika, something that connects the two parts of the garment. So she should not go out with that. It's not part of the garment itself. It's like an additional thing on the garment that there's biblical liability for carrying it. Ve'kovelet, amar Rav, chumarta defilon. That's a brooch, right? Brooch for fastening two parts of the garment. Shkoyach. Brooch. So that she should not carry. Kovelet is amar Rav, chumarta defilon. That's like I think it's like a necklace with a small box with perfume, balsam. Rashi says that women that have a foul odor put that to have to neutralize the. First one is a clasp. A clasp. You call it a clasp. Okay. It's like this small thing with perfume. Now about this perfume, there are three opinions. Tanu Rabbanan. The first opinion is she should not go out with that. That's what Rabbi Meir says in the Mishnah as well, that there's a biblical liability for going out with such a necklace with a box of perfume, a small box. The sages say it's like all other jewelry, that it's only subject to rabbinic decree. She should not go out with that rabbinically, but if she did go out, she's exempt, there's no biblical liability. The Rabbi Eliezer, Rashash says it should be Rabbi Elazar, but here it says Rabbi Eliezer, Omer, Yotzai Isha bechovelet lechatchila. Even in the first place, she can go out with that, and there's not even a rabbinic decree against it. So now the Gemara explains what are the reasonings of these three opinions. B'maika miflegei, Rabbi Meir savar masuyu. Rabbi Meir holds it's a burden. It's an unnecessary. It's not a jewel. It's not a garment. It's an unnecessary burden that she carries, and there's biblical liability for carrying it. The Rabbanan savar, the sages say tachshita. No, it's a jewel. It's like jewelry, and it's subject to the regular rabbinic decree against putting on jewelry. V'dil mashal fa'u mechavya v'akali yituya. There's a concern she might remove it and carry it in her hand. Rabbi Eliezer savar, Rabbi Eliezer rabbinic decree, because mandarka lemirmei, which woman puts that perfume? Isha shericha ra, a woman who has a foul odor. Isha shericha ra lo shalfa mechavya v'lo atyal yitu arba amot b'reshut harabim. Since she's embarrassed, she will not show it to anyone, so there's no concern. It's not subject to this rabbinic decree. Okay, Rabbi Eliezer says in the first place it's permitted, but now the question is, V'atanya, another Braita says, Rabbi Eliezer poter b'chovelet v'etzlochit shel exempt sounds like there's still a rabbinic prohibition, but there's no biblical liability. How come he says it so? In the first Braita he says that it's permitted in the first place. There's not even a rabbinic decree. So the answer is, lo kasha. In each Braita he speaks in a language according to the context of that Braita. Hikaya de Rabbi Meir, when Hakikaya de Rabbi Meir, Hakikaya de Rabbanan. When he is responding to Rabbi Meir, he responds in one version. When he responds to the sages, he responds in another version. Hikaya de Rabbi Meir, when he refers to Rabbi Meir, de Amar Chayav Chatat, Rabbi Meir says there's Chatat liability for that. As a response to that, he says Amar le patur says you say she's liable, I say she's exempt. But really he holds that she's permitted, not just exempt. But when he responds to Rabbi Meir, he says exempt. Kikaya de Rabbanan, when he refers to the sages, the Amrei patur aval asur, they hold that there's an exemption, but there's still a rabbinic prohibition. So Amar Yu, then he says mutar lechatchila. So that's his real opinion. And then we move to 62b. Umay Rabbi Meir, where do we find Rabbi Meir's opinion in a Braita without the sages? And there, that's where Rabbi Eliezer responds to him and says that there's an exemption as opposed to the liability of Rabbi Meir. The Tanya, in this following Braita, Lo tetze isha, and this Braita is unclear, and there's a need to change the version of the Braita. The Braita says, Lo tetze isha, b'mafteach shebiyada, a woman should not go out to the public domain with a key in her hand. Ve'im yatzat chayevet chatat. Divrei Rabbi Meir, of course, if anybody goes with a key in his hand, is liable to chatat. Rabbi Eliezer poter bechovelet u'vitzlochit shel palaitan. Now Rabbi Eliezer refers to this perfume and says for that she is exempt. But what's the connection to Rabbi Meir? Rabbi Meir spoke about a key, and he speaks about this perfume. It sounds like it's how do you call it? A deaf discussion. In Hebrew they say du-siach shel chirshim. They like two deaf people talk to each other. Each one says another thing, and nobody hears the other. Kovelet man dachar shma. Who spoke about this perfume? So the answer is chisuri mechasra ve'achi katani. The Braita is missing something. Rabbi Meir says that one is liable for going out with a key, and also v'chen bechovelet v'chen betzlochit shel palaiton lo tetze v'im yatza chayevet chatat divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says if a woman goes out to the public domain with this perfume on her necklace, she's liable to chatat. Rabbi Eliezer poter bechovelet v'tzlochit shel palaiton. He agrees with Rabbi Meir that if she goes out with a key in her hand, she is liable. That's of course a biblical liability. But he exempts in the case of this perfume. But when does Rabbi Eliezer agree that there's no liability? If there's still perfume inside this small box. But if there's no perfume, she's liable just for carrying the necklace with the box, with the empty box. So now Rav Ada bar Ahava thought he can conclude from here a novelty about a dispute that appears later in page 93. There's a dispute there. The Mishnah, for different things, there's always a minimum measure. How much should one take out from a public domain, private domain to public domain, or within the public domain and be liable for? There's always a minimum measure. And if one takes something less than the minimum measure, something too small to be liable for, in a vessel. So there's a dispute if in such a case he is liable at least for carrying the vessel. He's not liable for carrying that, let's say, half a dried fig of food. The measure of food for which one is liable is the size of the volume of a dried fig. If one carries half a dried fig, there's no liability for that. But what if you carry it in a vessel? According to one opinion, you're exempt in that case as well, because the vessel is subordinate to the food in it. Even though the food is such a small amount, just half dried fig, but the vessel serves the food, and as such it's subordinate to liability at all. Another opinion is that in case you carry half a measure in a vessel, so even though you're not liable for the half measure of food you carried, but you're still liable for the vessel, because the vessel is, you're liable for that. So Rav Ada bar Ahava assumes that if this woman is carrying this box of perfume, even though there's no perfume there anymore, but still there's fragrance, you can smell it still. So it's like there's half a measure there of perfume. So it says, Amar Rav Ada bar Ahava, zot omeret, from here we can conclude, hamotzi ochalin pachot mikeshiur bichli, that if one takes out on Shabbat half a measure, less than the minimum measure food in a vessel, chayav. One should be liable not for carrying the food, because the food is less than the minimum measure, but for carrying the vessel. The vessel is not considered subordinate to the food, because that's the case here. En babosem, in case this box of perfume is empty, there's still some fragrance there. So kefachot mikeshiur b'chlidam, it should be compared to a case of less than the minimum amount of food in the vessel, and he says that she's liable. She's liable for carrying the vessel. So here we see that the vessel does not become subordinate to the content within it. But Rav Ashi rejects this, and Rav Ashi says, Rav Ashi Amar, I can tell you that in general, one is exempt, because the vessel could be subordinate to the content. Here it's different. Here there's nothing. There's nothing there. There's nothing. How do you say that? Something you can touch, tangible. There's nothing tangible there. It's just a fragrance. So the vessel cannot be subordinate. The vessel could be subordinate to food, albeit less than the minimum measure. Okay, so there's no proof from here. And from now until the end of this daf, we have Agadetot. Since we mentioned this balsam, there's a prophecy in the book of Amos about the destruction of the temple, of the first temple. And he describes there those people who ignored the prophecies of all the prophets, and they were interested in their own indulgence. And it says there about them, "V'reishit shmanim yimshachu." They anoint the first of the oils, the best of the oils. So what was that? Amar Rav Yehuda, Amar Shmuel, ze palaiton. That's balsam. That's the oil that they engaged in. But then Mativ Rav Yosef challenges that. If you say that that's what they, that's how they indulge themselves in that oil, if so, it should have been decreed not to use that oil after the destruction of the temple, because the Baita says in Masechet Sotah that there was a decree after the destruction of the temple about a few things to avoid a few things. Afal palaiton gazar Rabbi Yehuda ben Bava decreed on that type of oil, balsam. Velo odulo, the sages did not admit to him. They said that you cannot make such a decree. It's too people can't accept it. Now, if you say that the purpose of this oil is just for pleasure, just for indulgence, like the prophet describes them, so then why did the sages not admit? If it's not an essential thing, so the sages should have admitted that it should be banned as a decree because of the destruction of the temple. But the answer is that not even things that are there just for pleasure were not banned, were not decreed. Amale Abaye. And the proof is, it says, according to your reasoning, hadichtiv, the verse there also describes those people, hashotim b'mizrekei yain, who drank wine with the mizrekei. Not sure what's the English translation, but that was a dispute. What was mizrekei yain? Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi. Chad amar knishkenin, one of them explained that this refers to knishkenin, which was, Rashi says, a white cup with two built-in straws that two people can simultaneously drink wine from the same cup. It's made for pleasure. One of them said they threw their cups of wine to one another. So would you say that since the prophet describes that pleasure that used to drink wine in that type of cup, you think that should be banned, that should be decreed? It's not. The proof is that Rabbi Baravuna, who obviously lived after the destruction of the temple, visited the house of the exilarch, and the exilarch drank wine in that such a cup with the straws. Rabbi Baravuna did not rebuke him, no problem. So therefore the conclusion is the thing that the sages decreed on is a thing that combines pleasure and joy. A combination of pleasure and joy was decreed after the destruction of the temple. Something for just pleasure without joy, there's no decree against. So it could very well be that the Reishit Shmanim, the first of the oil that the prophet describes, is indeed balsam. There's no decree against it, using it even now. So since we mentioned that prophet, so the Gemara also expounds another verse that it mentions there in the same chapter, just 2 verses before. Hashuchvim al mitot shen, those who lie on beds of shen. Shen is like what they take from the elephants.
Ivory.
Oh, shkoyach. Ivory bed. Where's Ivor? Yeah. They lie on the ivory bed. וסרוכים על ארשותם. So what, how do you expound that verse? אמר רבי יוסי ברבי חנינא מלמד שהיו משתינין מים בפני מיטותיהן ערומים. They used to urinate naked before their bed. No? But then, that was their sin, severe sin. But Megadef Rabbi Abahu refutes this. He says, it's very ugly, very not nice, but it's not such a severe sin that they deserve such a severe punishment for. The verse there says, "Lachen ata yiglu b'rosh golim." They will be the first of the exiles. Mishum demashtinin mayim b'fnei metotehem arumim yiglu b'rosh golim. Just before they urinate naked before their bed, they should be the first to be exiled. Doesn't sound befitting. Ela amar Rabbi Abahu, elu bnei adam shayu ochlim v'shotim ze im ze. It's people that used to eat and drink with one another. V'dovkim mitotehem ze b'zo. They brought their beds next to one another. Umachlifin eshotehem ze im ze. They used to exchange their wives with one another. Umasrichin arsotam b'shichvat zera she'eno shelahem. They contaminate their beds with semen which is not theirs. Amar Rabbi Abahu. And for that they deserve, of course, the severe punishment. Amar Rabbi Abahu ve'amri la b'matnit atana. Shlosha dvarim mevi'in et ha'adam li'idei aniyut. Three things bring a person to poverty. Ve'elu hem. Hamashtin mayim b'fnei mitato arum. If one urinates naked before his bed. U'mezalzel b'ntilat yadayim. One who is lax in washing hands, does not properly wash his hands. And the third thing, that his wife curses him in his face, in his presence. These three things bring a person to poverty. And now, one who urinates naked, that's only if he's facing his bed. If he faces away from his bed, there's no problem. Even if he faces his bed, only if he urinates on the ground. Aval b'mana, if it's into a vessel, late lanba, there's no problem. Umezalzel b'ntilat yadayim, one who does not regard washing hands. Amar Rava lo amaran ela delo masha yad klal. This only refers to a person who does not wash hands at all. Aval masha velo masha late lanba. But if he does wash, but not is not very meticulous in that, it's not a problem. But the conclusion is it's not so. Velav miltai. The Amar Rav Chisda, ana mashay meloch of naimaya. I wash hands. Hands full of water, and I receive hands full of good. Because if you use a lot of water for washing hands, you get a reward. If you do not do that, that's the opposite. One whose wife curses him, this is because he does not want to buy her jewelry. If he can afford it and does not do it, he will become poor. Okay, since we mentioned the behavior of the people before the destruction of the temple, so now there's also an exposition and a verse in Yeshayahu. Darash Rava about the promiscuity of the women in those times. Darash Rava Breder Rav Ilai, Mai Dichtiv, in Yeshayahu, after Corona we all wash better. Maybe we'll get rich. Yeah, but this is washing hands before, even without soap. So it's just washing for eat bread. The daughters of Zion, Gavhu, they used to go straight back, like haughty, with haughtiness. They used to go very slowly for the guys to look at them. They fill their eyes with this blue thing to beautify themselves. They were hinting the guys. They used to go a tall one next to a short one, because then the tall one looks much nicer. They put these perfumes in their shoes. Places of Jerusalem. Once they reached the Bachurim, the guys of Israel, they kicked the ground, Umatizot alehem, they sprinkle on them this perfume, splash on them. Umachnisot ben yetzera, they put in them the evil inclination. Ke'eres bechaos, bechaos like the venom in an angry snake. So that's how they behaved so promiscuously. And Rashi says they were even married women. That's how they behaved. They wanted to attract men. Yavet says even unmarried women are not supposed to be so promiscuous. But what was their punishment? He expounds the verses there later in that chapter. Instead of perfume, to perfume, will rot, maybe rot. I'm not sure, I don't have the English here. ותחת חגורה נקפא, instead of the belt, נקפא מקום שהיו חגורות בצלצול, the place that used to gird themselves, stand. They used to gird themselves with a nice belt, נעשה נקפים, wound, becomes wounded. ותחת מעשה מקשה כורחה, מקום שהיו מתקשטות בו, the place they used to adorn, נעשה כרכים, will become bold. ותחת פתיגיל מחגורת שק, פתחים המביאים לידי גילה, the openings that bring to joy, יהיו למחגורת שק, will be girded with sack. כי תחת יופי, אמר רבא, היינו דאמרים שחילופי שופרה קיבה. Instead of beauty comes pus, I think it's pus, like, yeah. וסיפח השם קודקוד בנות ציון, another punishment, אמר רבי יוסי ברבי חנינא, מלמד שפרחה בהם צרעת, he had the leprosy, צרעת affliction. כתיב אחא וסיפח, וכתיב אתם לשאת ולספחת. Right? It's harassment. והשם פה תן יערה, רב ושמואל חד אמר שנשפכו כקיטון, they poured like poured the blood, like a pot, וחד אמר שנעשו פתחיהם כיער, their openings became like a forest, as she said, became repulsive. אמר רב יהודה אמר רב, אנשי ירושלים, אנשי שחצי, the people of Jerusalem were haughty people, and people they used to speak with one another in like different language. They all spoke about promiscuity. Adam Amar Lechavro, one asked his fellow, "B'ma sa'at hayom, what did you eat today?" And he obviously was referring to what woman did you have last night? Befat amela, befat she'eina amela. Was it that type of bread or that type of bread? Is it she was a virgin or not a virgin? B'yayin gurdeli or b'yayin chardeli? Was it black wine or white wine? Was she white or black? B'misav rachav or b'misav katzar? Was she fat or thin? B'chaver tov b'chaver ra? Was she beautiful or ugly? Amar Rav Chisda v'chulan liznot, all of them were questions of promiscuity. Amar Rachva, Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Atzei Yerushalayim shel kinamoni, the trees of Jerusalem, the just the regular trees, were like cinnamon, that the tree itself has such a nice odor, nice fragrance. Uv'sha'a she'ayu masikin men, when they used to put them in fire, Reichan nodef b'chol Eretz Yisrael, the fragrance spread all over Eretz Yisrael. I think that this might connote that in those ancient times, even the mundane, very regular mundane things had such a nice aroma, such a nice atmosphere. They were so had such a great elevated life that even the wood spread such a nice fragrance. But the Meshecharvei Yerushalayim, when Jerusalem was destroyed, nignezu, those that type of trees were concealed. Only a very small size of a barley kernel was left. And where is it? It's in the treasuries of this queen Tzimtzemai that Marsha says we do not know who that queen is, but we can still try to search. Where can we find such a mundane cinnamon tree with such a nice fragrance? But now we're on the way to getting back to there. We're already made a turn. We're on the way back to redemption, to rebuilding the temple and regaining all these high elevated levels that we had in those times. No? Baruch Hashem. B'meira b'yameinu. Amen.
Thank you.
Okay, Baruch Hashem, we made it. It's the Zoom is almost going to expire, but Baruch Hashem. Thank you very much.
Have a nice day.
Yeah, kol tov. I'm not sure if you're still there in Facebook. Oh, thank you. I don't understand what did you mean when you say that women couldn't do certain things. It was not the reference there. It was nothing against women. It's just to say that women and men were just two different entities, like two different. The jewelry of men is not jewelry for women, and vice versa. There's no nothing negative. Just to say that like two different things. Okay.